Today we are painting in very simplified colors, and we're painting a beautiful Canadian goose, duck, don't think it's a goose. I have my actual painting actual paper for the painting, and I'll start doing a drawing first. And then I have a spare piece. We'll do some experiments. We'll practice how to do the background. We'll practice how to do the ripples. We'll practice how to do a little bit of mark making. But let's start off sketching out our painting all together, whole composition. Now, if I look at the sample piece here in front of me, I can see that it's almost divided into half for the what's above the water. I don't think it's the sky, possibly sky, but I think it might be some vegetation, maybe part of the hill, maybe something what we can see there in the back. And then we've got the water and it's all the reflections. I'm going to make that line slightly higher than halfway through because I want to see quite a lot of those reflections at the bottom. So I think it is higher than halfway through on the picture there as well. So if that is there, maybe just a tiny bit higher. I think I can make it a tiny bit higher. Okay, so let's remove maybe that one. Don't forget we're sketching in lighter lines. Okay, if you can't see mine, it means that I need to press on my lines better so you can see it on the camera. Okay, and let's do the shape of the bird next. Complex thing, but let's break it down into simple shapes. Now we also want to make the bird belonging to the water and the ripples kind of belonging to the same space where the bird is going to be. So I'm going to start with drawing an oval, a ripple of an oval around the bird. So it will be quite a shallow oval, but it gives me a depth. Yeah, so I've got this overall big ripple, rough. It doesn't have to be perfect because we will be changing slightly its shape. It's not a perfect object, okay? That ripple will be slightly different in its shape. But that tells me where my Canadian goose, Canadian duck, goose is going to be. Okay. So I have a smaller oval now for the base of the bird. So almost like not in the center, but not overly too much on the left-hand side. So I have quite a bit of space, maybe somewhere here left out. So I'm just comparing it. And before I start doing all the complex things, which we don't have to keep complex, I want to get a rough shape, how big the bird is going to be. Okay, that's going to be the tail, how much space I'm going to be left out. So can we just get an overall shape? Okay, loads of lines might help us out to create that shape. How much space we have on the left from it, how much space we have on the right from it. Okay, that gives us that comparison. Maybe if I need to have a tiny bit more. Otherwise, we'll end up with a tiny bird, or we're not going to be able to fit it in. Okay. And we can do a similar shape at the bottom. That will be our reflection. Okay. So it's going to be similar bulkness. So then we know that's roughly the same in size. Okay, that's actually might tell me also what type of lines I'm going to have above the surface of the water and below the surface of the water. So maybe that line, this line, okay, are they similar? Where is it slightly? The reflection is much more obscure shape. So you probably will get it easier rather than looking and visualizing the bird, the body of the bird. So look for the overall broken down bulkiness of the silhouette of the reflection. And there are loads of ripples at the end of that reflection, so you don't have to even put perfect definition for it. Okay. So this is how I start working into the big shapes, in sort of complex shapes, starting from big forms. Now let's break down now where roughly we're going to have the head and the neck of the bird. So if I were to divide the whole of that big shape into half, so the head and the neck is going to be in the first half. Okay, so if I were to put a line there, maybe tiny bit more over, and that curvature of the neck, and the head is over the body, so it's not overlapping that body. Okay, so I might just put elongated circle. Maybe I think it needs to go a little bit more forward. I'm looking again halfway through the bird, yeah, where the front of the bird is, where that oval in comparison to those shapes. So maybe I can move it slightly. So then I could have, so I'm not spending a lot of time on details yet. I'm planning big structures, because if they're wrong, in the wrong position, I'll have to redraw it. If they're, I don't want to spend time doing big size patterns if I haven't got the form right. I'll then roughly plan the neck. There's a lovely curvature for it, and then it moves forward. Okay, so the neck, it's actually a very good neck exercise. If you pretend to be a goose, it's amazing after we've been sitting down for a lot to kind of lean your neck backwards. Really good physio exercise. Okay, and I have this lovely fluffy semicircle for the tummy, for the chest. Okay, and I think that gives me an opportunity to put a reflection of it as well here. Again, I haven't decided if I've got the right shape here, if I've got the right size of it. Roughly looking good, but I'm not going into any more details yet. I can have a direction of the beak. That will also tell me how much space from the body I'm going to have. Maybe that beak will go a little bit lower. Maybe that whole head will need to go lower. I need to decide. Sometimes extending the head is a good option, but sometimes if I'll extend the head becomes too big. So maybe I'll shrink the size of my initial oval and get that rough parallel line with the body, and how roughly long the beak is going to be. Maybe a little narrow triangle in there, just to give us an idea of its length. And then you can compare, is the head looks a bit too big or is it too small in comparison to the body? Okay. Now, before we go into more details on the head of the bird, I think mine will need to go a tiny bit smaller still. Maybe a tiny bit smaller. We're going to look back at the body and its shape. So we have a lovely structure to the wings of the bird, and that will help us to find out which shape's going to be a bit more higher, which shape's going to be a bit more lower. So we have one shoulder. So we have, for example, that chest. Okay, so we're looking at that lovely curvature of the chest of that white, and then what happens then? We start having two separate forms. They're together, and then they slowly start separating. So I'm looking for that separation, that structure, where that line is going to be. Okay, and that will tell me the lower, I think that might need to go a bit lower, the lower fluffy tummy or feathers for the tummy, and that is going to be actually our wing. So these lines are just to help me out to understand the form. They're not the patterns. They can be part of the patterns as well, but they don't have to be. That's how we read the shape, because we see the development of those patterns. Okay, so that's mainly at the bottom of it. And the feathers kind of fluffing up and a nice kind of filling up, lovely and curvy at the bottom there. Okay, but also we've got that shoulder which goes triangly up kind of that direction, and now we'll have the opposite wing. Yeah, so the two wings come together. That's where that height is getting maybe not as tall as that, but that direction, that structure. That's where I can see, I think the tail might be a little bit wider than I initially planned. Okay, that's going to almost like show us the highlight on our wings, now closest to our wing. Okay, and then we can add the tail. Now the tail is going to be all the ends of the feathers there as well, of the wings, so they're all going to be somewhere there. It's going to be a little bit of extra, but that's its overall big shape. You can see a bit of darkness there. I think we'll put those feathers a bit more lower down. Okay, these are spiking up. I might lower them down. Okay. So that fluffiness of the wing, what I want to do, I want to find semi-horizontal lines from the back. And they're almost like following that arch, yeah? Kind of a larger version of this chest white shape. So if I were to draw them all together, they're almost like, yeah, sliced, beautiful bread, yeah? Loaf, a lovely roundy shape. By following that, we can also see a bit more of a shadow at the back of the body, which just follows. Yeah, so we don't need to make it up, it's there. So that's the structure of our bird. Before we get to the head. For the reflection of the neck, all I'll do is roughly mirror So if it's the widest part here, I'll roughly mirror its position. It's quite low here. Something darker, lighter, I'll just keep it overall. I just need to be aware where it's going to be. But I will play with the lines of the reflections afterwards. I'll do that with a brush straight away. I might even help myself with kind of finding some of the edges of that shape, maybe with semi-horizontal lines. So I've just removed some of the supporting lines, and let's have a look at the neck and the head. Now, because we have a lot of dark tones and bold white, so the contrasts are really, really great. It's harder to differentiate what's happening to the actual shape. So what I'll do then, because I have a shape of an oval for the head, I'm going to make sure that I can see where the head is kind of finishing at the bottom, where maybe the jaw is. Okay, well, it's not going to be the jaw is going to be part of the beak, but it's going to be the bottom of the skull. And I'll look for the shadow, the shape of the darker and lighter silhouettes right at the front of the neck. So we have a lovely little curvature under the neck, so under the head, something like that there. So that's maybe the edge of my neck there. Something goes up, and then a very soft, in comparison to that very contrasty shape, will paint a very soft edge on the other side. Again, sharp shadow on that neck, on that left-hand side of the neck. Okay, I can just follow it through, and I can straight away draw a shadow on the body. So that will be a slightly darker brown on the feathers. So I'm identifying it now. I'm planning it straight away. And today is everything about planning. So my lines are going to help me with my painting. Where I'm making some of the lines darker, that's where some of my shadows are going to be. So for example, on the base of this chest, fluffy white, I'm going to remove that line and keep it light. I know it's going to be there in different color, but I'm going to keep it light. When the left-hand side, there is always almost kind of distinctive dark. I think that's how the feathers slightly almost poking at us. We see darker a shadow there. And there's also a silhouette of the shadow on the body of the bird right behind its neck. Okay, so if that is the neck, that is the end of the body. Let's draw the silhouette of the shadow from the beak. Looks quite a silly shape, something elongated. And again, it helps us in a way to see how the feathers following that form. Okay, again, if I'll just tidy it up so you can see my lines a little bit better. I think maybe this line shouldn't be so elongated, maybe. Shorter, longer. Shorter than longer, maybe something like that. The neck on my reflection, joining the body. And sorry, I have adjusted the base of the bird and the water, so I need to adjust my reflection here, otherwise they're not matching here as well. Okay, something here. So I haven't got as much space behind it as I hope, but it's working. It's looking okay. Right, so what's going to happen to the head? Now we've got the rough size of the beak, and what I'll do, I'll find the eyebrow for the bird, which should be similar parallel line to the top part of the head here. So almost like if I'm drawing the top of the head. So that's going to be the top part of the eyebrow. It also gives me a change of the shape for the nose, or kind of the front of the skull here. And then we're going to come up to the beak. The lighter part of the beak. Beak is larger than what we can actually see. What we can see is some highlights, the big nostril. So we'll paint it dark without differentiating of actually what's happening to that beak, how it's merging to the head. And we'll just have a round edge at the base here. Okay. And then we'll identify a rough shape for the eye. Now the eye's almost hidden within the head, so I haven't got much reflection in it. It's quite a larger shape of a circle. I'm not going to draw much of it because I can't see much of it. So I can just see a smaller, grayer silhouette of its highlight. So that's what I'm going to do. So instead of doing a whole, I'm just going to enlarge it here. So that is my eyebrow. So I've got the shape of the eye, and all I'm going to keep is that little shape of the moon in a way, yeah? All the rest is going to be more or less similar tone to the head. So that's why I'm not going to focus on sketching much of it. And then I've got a pattern, the white pattern on the cheek to sketch. Again, it's probably going to follow the shape of the head somewhere here. Okay. And just below the eye, might just have a look how much space we want to leave. As much as I'm looking for the actual pattern on the bird, I'm also trying to make sense if it's following that shape, if it's more of a round shape, or if it's more straighter line, how it's following the cheek, because it's following that structure underneath of it. That's where I can amend maybe my cheekbone here, well, the lower part of the skull. Okay. And I'll make sure that that shape stays white. I think mine need to go a little bit more further towards the front. But every bird is slightly different. So if yours will end up with slightly different shape, it's fine as well. I think that cheek, that angle for the edge of it will be more important. So I left quite a lot of angled type of lines. I know when I start painting with a brush, I'm more likely to have more roundish shapes So if I start with a bit more structures, if they soften down under my brush, that's when I'll lose them gently. Okay, just double checking that my reflection of the beak is fine enough. I think somewhere there, yeah. Right. And let's draw a couple of shapes of the leaves for the water plants. I might just put some of the stems. Maybe a couple which have the heavier, bulky heads. Bulrushes, if I remember it right. If I pronounce it right. Okay, so big, chunky shapes. Maybe another line coming up here. Any variations of them will be fine. I'm not going to draw the rest. Might put a leaf folding just to remind me that it could be a variety of shapes in there. But I don't want to draw too many, as I want to keep them a bit more spontaneous. However, what I will do, I'll check where they start, and they need to be within that oval. Remember, we've done the first oval where the goose was belonging to, okay, where that reflection is going to be. So they need to be not in the horizon, they need to be somewhere there. Some of them could be further back, but some of the key ones we'll need to keep in a bit more close. I think the plants at the back, I might just do a couple, just as a reminder of their height. I don't think I want to do much, because depending how my brush stroke's gonna go, everything might be different. And then we're not gonna forget the reflection, mainly of the couple of plants at the foreground. So if I follow that big shape, so I need to know where its base is. And then from that point, I need to have a symmetrical, yes, so that one's leaning that way. That will have to lean towards the left as well. It's roughly somewhere getting wider. Roughly it's going to get somewhere getting wider. Okay. And I might just do a couple of identifying some of the bases of the plants, and then do, I think, maybe a couple of lines here. So when I start painting, these reminders lines are there, but they're not breaking up. Yeah, so I don't need to be confused. Oh, is it that direction? There's a bit more that one. Is it what length of it is there? I already planned it with my pencil. I can see I smudged some of my paper, so I'm just cleaning my paper. Smudged with my hand. Now let's practice some of the colors, and let's practice some of the techniques before we start painting our piece. I have a sophomore brush, so I've got loads of rubbings in here. I'm going to move them away. My palette, okay, so there I go. So I have a soft mop brush, have two synthetic brushes for maybe smaller details, narrower strokes, and a large flat brush or any large brushes you can have. And also we'll need a big wash brush to practice as well. Right, so first of all, let's just get some of the colors out. We're going to have one blue, so we're going to have a minimum palette today. And it could be ultramarine, or it could be phthalo blue, or it could be a combination of either of them. Let's get them out and have a look. I think it's going to be maybe a combination of them. Azure or phthalo blue, whichever you have. And as I have my color here, I also might practice the type of lines I'm going to be making with it. Wider strokes, narrower strokes, wider strokes, narrower strokes. Some of those water reflections. Narrower ones, some longer ones, some wider ones. No, I think this color will do me nicely. And I can also dilute it and make it lighter. I think my blue's sorted. Paler, diluted color, a bit more narrower or a little bit more wider. So I'm pressing on a brush and lifting it. So I can do some lighter strokes. Might be just dragging one into another. We'll do some lighter ones first, and then we'll add some darker ones as they will be drying. Yes, I'm just playing with the technique where the lines are still, the lighter lines are still dark, and I'm touching them up with sorry, still wet. I'm touching them up with darker shape. They will blend. We want to have that turning round shape of the ripples. Yeah, we can practice that. Again, the variety will be more important. Variety of strokes, very narrow ones, much wider ones. Right, I can see, I think it will be better if I'll do my shapes when they will be slightly drier rather than wet. Okay. So Azure as a blue, or any of them, your preferred blue. Okay, Cyril?
Yes, thank you. I was just going to say turquoise was probably
turquoise, yes, it could be okay. If you don't have any stronger the blues, maybe add a little bit of violet to it, so it will be slightly bit more darker.
Right.
Okay. Otherwise, we might lose. Yeah. Otherwise, we might lose that reflection of the sky. But it might be okay. Quite nice. Might be turquoise as well. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yes, thank you.
And let's find the color combination for the background, for the bird, and for everything else. What's left? I think it's going to be cadmium red, the color we haven't been using much. So it's kind of orangey red. So this is a freshness. Oops, if I get a bit more water. So that will be my orange red. Maybe even cadmium orange, any of kind of combination of these two. Yeah, maybe that one better. And I'm going to mix it with my violet. So let me just put a fresh violet here first. Okay, my lighter violet or my darker violet. depends how much pigment I'm picking up. So if I'll mix those colors together, I'm going to have that combination. I'm going to have that color in between them. So I can have it a bit more orangey, or I can have it a little bit more violety. Okay, can make it lighter. That looks more violety, lighter. And let's have a bit more orangey red, lighter. Okay, maybe a bit more orange. So those are going to be our combinations for today. Any of them. So you have two colors, violet and cadmium orange. If you don't have cadmium orange, any other oranges will be fine. You'll just have a bit more browny color, which is totally fine as well, but reddy browny I think is better. That yeah, that's a bit more brown. I think it's when it has a bit of that redness, stands out a little bit better. Okay. And then when we'll start painting the dark tones of the neck for the bird, for the head, we can use a little bit of indigo. So if that is my fresh indigo, let me put some fresh indigo on the paper. Okay, that's solid indigo, and that's a bit more diluted. So if I can add that color to my violet and red, so that will be a beautiful gray, especially for the neck, very much glowing from underneath, kind of blue, but there's also some redness going on, how the color pigment separates will give that softness, short, feathery effect. And then we can make it a bit more solid in darkness by adding more violet and indigo. If we want it to be extra dark, we can add more cadmium orange to it. If we wanted to have, so we can have a warmer version of it, or we can have a darker, cooler version of it. Okay. That's what we'll do with the feathers in the darker part of the bird, tail, the back. Some of the reflections will vary. So this color is a bit more orangey red, dark. When this, the one next to it's more bluey, more indigo. So because we have a few complex things on a painting, they're complex, but we just need to break them down into steps. We're going to keep our colors very simple. So 3 colors for the birds and the background, and 1 blue. So I'm gonna go for that cadmium orange, indigo, violet. That's it. Or you can make that color a bit more orangey. And another piece I'd like us to practice, well, another section I want us to practice to paint. Well, actually 2 sections, one for the bird as a whole body, another one as the part of the background. So the body of the bird has slightly darker tail end and slightly lighter front. Obviously the chest is all white, so we're going to keep it white. So what I'll do there, I'll have my orangey violets. So my orange and a small bit of violet. And I'll paint all of the shape. So for example, that is my shape of the bird. Okay, the front is going to stay white. Okay, just looking a bit silly shape. But I'm going to paint all of it together while it's staying damp, while it's staying moist. We're going to put a bit of water on the actual shape because our shape is going to be slightly bigger. This is quite a small one. What I'll do very quickly, I'll immediately add small amount of extra of that orange. Okay, I might be exaggerating it slightly more. Okay, somewhere here, maybe somewhere then of them, the side. So where the feathers at the front, we can have that sharpness of the color, that redness. And further away towards the tail, I'm going to pick up tiny bit more violet. So within my first color, I'm adding these colors. A bit more violet. Okay, picking up some blue here as well, which is fine. And then I can turn it a bit more dark with a bit of indigo and violet, or a bit of indigo and red, which any. So that is going to be my tail end. Okay, I'm just more interested in how those colors are going to be blending, what's going to be happening to them. I haven't done the neck or anything else here, but that's why it's going to be. This is just for me, for you to see with the shape. So I'm more interested into all of that color practice in combination. We can do the details after. Now, the rest of the paper I've got here in the corner left. You might want to have a different piece if you haven't got anything spare left. I'm going to practice that background we have behind the bird. So I'll need my wash brush, and I'll need to apply the water there thoroughly, really well. And then I'll use a larger flat brush or whatever larger brush you have. Mix my cadmium orange and violet. I need to go for quite strong pigment. So I'll go for, because it will make it slightly lighter. Don't forget, by placing some water on the background first, will make the pigment lighter. I think I've got something violet. Okay. So maybe a bit of that stronger pigment. Maybe adding a bit more orange. Don't be scared of exaggerating that boldness. Maybe making the color slightly lighter. Maybe bringing some more violet, more concentrated violet. And letting it blend. So this is our wet on wet abstract interpretation. And then we can add on top of that, well, whole surface is painted and covered. We can go for some indigo. And maybe part of the shadow behind is going to be the indigo. But we need to be careful so it's not going to stay darker than the head of our duck. So we'll paint it first before we paint the head. So if I'll just put a couple of strokes on the head of the bird here, well, roughly. So I just need to make sure that that will remain darker after it's been painted. Okay, so If that is going to be clashing contrast, I'm in trouble. So maybe the head will need to have a couple of layers, or maybe my blue will need to be slightly lighter, or maybe slightly further away from the head, so it's not going to have a close contact. Okay, I wasn't planning for them, for this sample, to have the shapes close together. So I have quite a lot of white around it. But more importantly, from here, I'm interested in, can I have those shapes? Can I have those three colors together quickly, boldly, and excitingly applied? Now, for those of you who enjoy using a palette knife, you can lift a couple of lines of light for the plants. For those of you who struggled with lifting paint with a palette knife, I'd recommend that you let the paint dry, and we'll lift it with a brush and then introduce a little bit of fresh color afterwards. So this is going to be a very quick painting, just doing a little bit of practicing of lifting. So if in any doubt, or you're too late to lift it, don't worry about it. We can do silhouettes of the plants, or we can lift color with a brush. Right, so what we'll start is our blue colors, our lighter blues, and then our darker blues. We're gonna let some of them dry as well. So I'm going to have my soft mop brush, and I'm using Azure or whichever blue you're happy with. Ultramarine would be fine as well, maybe with a dab of emerald green in it. And I'll start with the lighter versions of it. So I've got a nice solid pigment here. Let's just get some more water to it and make it pale. And I'll start with, okay, that's good. I'll start with putting some of the blues, pale blues, for the water reflections around the bird. So I have some at the back. If you will leave some of the whites, that's brilliant. Just ignore all the plants. Just go over, maybe some wider strokes, some narrower strokes, within that shape of the oval, roughly, okay? Some sort of turns, press on the brush a bit more, press on the brush a bit less. Going to be tiny bit going over the body of the reflection. Okay, that gives it nice, fresh feel. Then up to the bird here on the left-hand side, that paler blue could come up. So I'm still going for paler colors. At the end of the reflection, I think I'm going to do a few strokes, and I'm also interested now in enlarging this stroke. The wider the strokes become, we should be able to see the wider strokes closer to us, okay, where that reflection is, and that those ripples getting wider, a bit more narrower further away from us, but they're getting a bit more wider towards us. Okay, there's another one, very, very pale somewhere here, very diluted. I've got some rubber bits there. Okay, they can be larger than they are on the picture, because once we'll start using our browns, our orange violet, they could be lost very easily. So I prefer to do some wider strokes now, rather than not being able to see or find them later on. Okay. And then the base of the painting, going to use my mop brush and load loads more moisture, and almost the top of the head, kind of anything above the head, reflection of the head, I'm going to paint it all together in one color, in one lighter tone. If you wanted to leave a couple of gaps, you can, but be careful not to make them too breaking down the surface too much. So I prefer you to do lighter wash rather than leave the whites. Okay, just a lighter, very light wash. And we can give it a moment to settle. And now I'm going to go for slightly darker blue. Same blue, but just changing its tone. I'm going to come back to some of the strokes at the back just to make some of them slightly darker. It doesn't mean that I have to break them down into loads of segments or loads of details. I'm interested into that pattern of how much of that blue is going to be there. Some of the lines could be much more narrower, but more concentrated into that blue. Maybe a little dots or broken little marks. Improvisations are very, very welcome. I'm going to get rid of some of these whites I have. And again, I can do those lovely swooping little marks, which gives me beautiful strokes and lovely feel for the reflections. If in doubt, stop, let it dry. We'll work with other colors on top and things might get improved. So don't try to scribble colors or try to wash them away. We want that transparency of the water present. And the further, well, the lower down I'm going for the water, I'm going to introduce slightly more blue. We're going to try to vary the volume of it. There's some nice stronger lines of blue at the front. I'm trying to vary the width of the strokes, the size of them, the lengths of them. If the hand wobbles, make a nice exciting ripple out of it. That's okay. And then at the bottom, I think I'm going to make a couple of stripes going almost all the way. My paper is still a bit wet at the bottom here, but hopefully that will settle in eventually. Maybe splitting a little bit at the end on the right. Yeah, split probably goes to be part of those ripples. You don't have to copy the lines identical as they are on the illustration in front of us. Just gonna move my camera a tiny bit more lower to show you the base of my painting here. Don't forget, we have not introduced any browns there yet. So for those areas where the browns will be added, don't have to finish all the ripples. So I just planned my blue a little bit more heavy, a little bit more of it on the bottom right corner, and then a gently busier on the right and much more less, maybe paler or smaller blocks of that blues on the left. Once we've done our browns, we can always come back to our blue, maybe in some of the areas to make it a bit more stronger, maybe work a little bit around the shape of the head of the bird. We'll see how that develops once we have other colors. Right, so what I'll do next, I'll start painting the background. So I'll put some water over the all of that space, except I'll come really close to the shape of the bird. I'm not too bothered if the color will go over the bird, because I'm going to have a very dark neck, very dark head, but I don't want it to run into the white pattern of the on the head. Okay, and I also want to link that background color with the color of the body here. And if I can bring that background color close to some of my earlier lines of blue, that's my aim. So everything from the top up to the first blues, up to the white, and avoiding the white there. So it means that where I'm going to have darker shapes of the head, I need to make sure that the background is going to be remaining lighter next to those silhouettes. Tail is going to be darker. I need to make sure that the background is staying lighter. It doesn't mean it's white or off-white. It's just lighter than a dark patch of it here, because I'm going to start playing with the colors and I could quite easily get myself lost in it. Okay. If I'll remember the lift some leaves, lift some color from the leaves, I'll do that. If not, if I'll have to handle other things, I'll just leave them as they are. Okay. Right. So some water on my wash brush. And actually, maybe I should prepare my colors first. So if I'll have my cadmium orange, if I'll have my violet, at least in its basic mix, so then I can dip in and paint quickly. Maybe I'll have one a little bit more into orangey. Okay, so I'm good there. So if you have got masking fluid, you could have painted that shape of the white on the head with the masking fluid, but we don't really have to. Okay, but my mission is for the water not to get to it. So to avoid it, I might just paint a little bit over the head, but not far enough. Okay, I've got some robins here again. Okay, so I'm painting all the way to the blue over the body of the bird here. Tiny bit of the neck. I'm not coming too far into the neck, just off the edges, so I will soften some of it. I can paint over the beak, that's totally fine. And up to the blue again. Now you can't see where it is. I can't see where that water is, but I think I've got a good idea. Okay. And now I have my larger flat brush. I'm gonna go for some of the bold lights, maybe even, I think that looks like a nice color for the body of the bird here. Maybe a tiny bit more water to keep it light, maybe a bit more orangey. So I want to paint it all in one go, all of it. Okay, a bit more lighter here. I can just see how much water is in there, so I'm working to the bird here, the background here, just leaving some whites. So here I can paint both. I can paint the background and the beak all together. Okay. A little bit more stronger orange. I think I can do something there. a bit more stronger orange. So some places a bit more accurate, some places a bit more wacky. Okay, some more, just don't want the paper to dry. Let's just fill all that one in. A bit more, let's say, make it a bit more violet here. I quite like that bit of warmth at the back. I can paint it over the tail because the tail is going to be much darker. Okay, all this area could be painted as well, although I will make it much more cooler shortly. Just want to make sure that the head is part of it all, but doesn't have to be going far. I want that color to be present, but not running too far. Okay, that makes sense, hopefully. Okay, so all the bottom of the shape is there. Now I can play a little bit more with the color. I don't quite like this orangey mark. Maybe I can move it tiny bit more above somewhere here. So the whole surface of the painting is now wet here. So I can now a bit more have more control. I can add more colors, but close to the bird, I'll keep it more diluted and a little bit more gentle. Okay. And now I'm going to go for my indigo. Okay, I don't want it super solid. I can always make it super solid. Okay, so let's bring it across. Let's make all that one blend again. Don't want any stripes. Just want to make sure that next to the head, the shape, the colors are light. Okay, my indigo is darkening up maybe somewhere here. Again, next to the head, neck, it's close, but it's all the colors overlapping, but I don't want it to be solid. Okay, and I think I can go now a bit more stronger indigo and violet with some of that orange, more indigo. I just still want to have a little bit of the darkness, otherwise it looks slightly flattish here. Maybe the parts of the plants and that's a bit higher. Something's there. Okay. And I think I want something from the top as well. Otherwise it's again drying quite light. All that surface is damp, so that creates a bit of movement. I think I want a little bit of droplets of water there as well. And so once I've painted the whole surfaces, I'm relaxed now. Yeah, as the surface staying damp, and I can just move the color about. Can do other details later on. Right. I'll do a couple of lifting of the plants leaves here if they will lift. If they don't, they don't. If I scratch the surface, that's fine as well. Okay. Maybe the other way. That's better. So it's more of the surface belonging together than anything else. Okay. So if that top part of the painting is still damp, let it settle and let it dry. You can always come back and do some more details for the plants around it. But let's see what we can do with the middle ground now and how we can work into our bird. So I have my mop brush again. I need to make sure it hasn't got any previous blue color in it. and I'm going to load it with a little bit more orangey violet, more into the orange side, and I want to have some lighter colors because I want to paint to find where the end of the pond is and some of the lighter. Remember how we've done the paler whites, paler blues? That's what I want to do with the rest of the surface of the water. So somewhere over here, right, tiny bit less water for the moment. So I'm going to have some of the shapes. They're lighter strokes, so if I'm painting some of the plants over them, they're not overwhelmingly dark. Okay, so something there, the surface of the lake is going to stop. Possibly I can do it slightly darker even later, but for the moment that's going to be the shape. I want to stay with paler colors first, maybe even paler than that. So if I'm painting on the white, now you can see that is pale because I was overlapping existing orangey color. That looks darker there. Okay, so I'm going to leave a little bit of white between the blues, but I'm going to paint majority of it, okay, with my lighter color. You can also go over the reflection of the bird here, just under its white chest. I'll come back to the bird and its bird's reflection, but for the moment, just the shapes around it, maybe a tiny bit more warmth from the orange, cadmium orange. Okay, coming close to this reflection here later on. So my blue is merging with other colors. I want to make varieties of colors here as well. So let's make it a tiny bit more into the orange red. And I'll have that nice and strong. Actually, that's might need to be added later, so that will be one somewhere here. So I'm ignoring the reflections of the plants. Okay, around the neck of the bird, what I'll do, I'll keep the shapes, my colors pale. Haven't decided how I'm going to do them yet. Well, I have, but I'm going to keep them light for the moment. I'm going to do them slightly dark afterwards. But at this stage, I'm just interested in the shapes on the water. Don't want to pay too much attention to the bird's reflection here. Okay, so I'm just going for those lighter tones over. I can paint over the blue as well. That will give me a little bit more grayish lines, but it will give me a range of them in comparison if I were just painting on the white. So my color will slightly change. Okay, I've just touched up a hint of violet here, so that's a nice stroke. I think going into more just darker version of those oranges will be good as well. So I'm intensifying the color and its depth as I'm coming a tiny bit closer to the foreground. Okay, so let's make something slightly darker. I can also have my lines a bit more straighter, less overly to the front, close to the front. Okay, that much more open and fresh. Okay, I haven't decided how much of this I'm going to leave out, so I'll have to go for it. Make it bold. So I'm more interested into those shapes of brown, or how much of that browny orange in volume it's going to be. I don't want the stripy water. I want shapes. And those are light lines first. We can do those darker browns anytime when the paint is dry, as we can work with a little bit more effects, a bit more okay. And once I've done the water, I could start working on the bird's reflection, on the bird's feathers as well. And now I'm going to add a tiny bit more color to the body of the goose, my Canadian goose. I'm going to go for some fresher orange. Remember how we were adding a bit more color to the body? And maybe even go for yellowy orange, just to have slightly more variation. And I can see a little bit of extra warmth somewhere at the top here. Maybe a tiny bit of feathers, little shapes alongside some of my lines, pencil lines, but not too major. We're still doing some big shapes first. You can see a little bit of warmth on the other side. Okay. So the light transparent layers might disappear, might reappear, depends how you apply them. And then I need to paint the actual reflection. Okay, that's not the right color. Okay, so for the reflection, I'll paint all of the shape in a similar darkness. I want to make it slightly darker than the existing color of the bird above. And I'll paint all of that shape together. And the reflection has a lot of soft shapes to it. So once I've done my overall color, I need to be working quite quickly with other colors. So first of all, I'm going to soften any sharper edges. So for example, next to the chest here. Okay, and then I'll go for a little bit more stronger orange. Again, maybe somewhere to see that what I've painted slightly stronger on them, in warmer color on the top. Probably can't see much there. But that's going to be my darker strokes. Well, I've got that color. I can do a couple of strokes here, so they're all matching in a way. I might do a couple of strokes on the damp surface, kind of mirroring my feathers, shapes, strokes above. Okay, something below. The top of the body is going to be slightly darker, and then I'm going to go for my indigo, and the left hand side of the bird is going to have slightly darker tone. And I can also stretch some of the lines out, maybe drier strokes. Well, the background is dry there, so that's going to link our silhouette of the reflection with actual water. Okay, you can always make it darker, but I prefer to go slightly lighter first. And those are choppy lines to show the surface is uneven. Okay, that's all nice and soft. We can do a very fine, tiny, darker line, probably the same color I'm using now, that's why I'm doing it. Tiny, tiny, thinner line under the actual bird. So that will be the water line dividing what's the actual bird and where's the reflection, where the water is. Okay, and while I'm on that water reflection, well, I've got those colors here. I'm going to do the little bit of a zigzaggy marks, quite playful, on the border of the reflection where the probably slightly shadow is going to be. So if part of these lines going to stay slightly damp, fantastic. If not, that's fine as well. And I think I'm ready for the neck here as well. I have my indigo with some of these browns. So I'll make a little uneven line for the border of white and the neck. Paint all of that shape a little bit more together and then go for a darker contrast. Indigo, violet, cadmium orange. Indigo is dominating here. I have some darker strokes in a rough shape. My pencil lines helping me out to know where I roughly should be going or where I shouldn't be going as far. I'm just going to do some zigzaggy shapes. Some of them could go a bit more further because that's how sometimes the light is traveling. Doesn't mean that the bird got a silly looking head. Okay. Maybe a couple of darker marks back over my indigo, earlier indigo, and I think I can do it now. Add the tail again because that color is softening and drying. And then there could be some sharper marks as well as diluted and soft. So any of those combinations would be fantastic. I can do tiny bit of touching up of other reflections on the water. So maybe focus on your main bird shape. The other shapes you can always touch up later on. Maybe the beginnings of some of the plants there. Maybe that's where those little reflections of that similar indigo is going to be on them. I'm just following my pencil marks for the plants while that color is similar here, while I have it in front of me. Something there. Some of these shapes just drying out a bit awkwardly, so I might help the watermark settle more in the way I want them to be. Again, if any other plants need to be followed through. Just the mop brush is the best one to work with. Because it just naturally creates those little marks. Very suggestive. A couple of extra ones here. You can see where I'm lacking in a little bit of blue, so I might just bring stronger blue here as well. Any other nuances behind the bird. And then I can do some details on the bird itself. So now I'm going to start using smaller synthetic brushes, round brushes, and do a little bit of playful feathers for the texture of the wings first. So I know overall the body needs to get the volume first. So I think I'm going to start with that violety orange and create the volume of that wing first. Okay, so we see that fluffiness, that turning of that surface. It's the whole shape is turning. So I've done it slightly darker, and I'm going to blend the right edge of it and maybe add something similar, maybe a couple of occasions, just to show maybe a slightly wider feather there. Just gives that not quite stripy, but volumey. In fact, I don't want any sharp edges here. Okay, and then tiny bit of it as well at the back here, where some of the pale tones will stay in the center, so close to the water. Again, very, very soft, gentle wash. And I can also bring a paler color close to the white chest. We haven't done much to the white at all yet. And what I'll do, I'll just use a diluted version of that orangey violet, where violet probably more dominating. So it's looking like a grayish, pale gray tone. And I'll work almost as if I were to trying to reduce the size of that oval. I don't know if you can see it there much or not. I'll photograph it for you a bit more. So it's slightly darker at the top, slightly darker on the edges, and then I soften that. There shouldn't be any sharp lines. Beautiful soft merge. Okay, I've got some droplet here, another color here. Okay, and I'll just make sure that it reflects in the water here as well. So if my white went a bit too far, I need to make sure it also doesn't have as much white at the bottom. Maybe make my reflection slightly darker underneath. Okay, good. Now, while this is still damp, I can add, let's have a look how damp it is. No, it's okay. I can have some of the feathers, just let's work them quite quickly. Paler ones, better at the front. We don't want them too strong. Okay, further at the back, we can have them a little bit more contrasting. we're following the lines. That's our reflection. I might just put a couple of lines there. Okay, just building them up. Sometimes that could take you a little bit longer because it's best to build them up rather than go too sharp, very dark tones. Plus the paint is partially damp, so that's when you'll have some beautiful merges and also sharp corners. That's lovely. And then I'll go more into the indigo violet and paint the whole tail. The part of the end of the tail will go even darker, but I'm gonna let it dry first. I want it to merge, that color to merge with the bird at the back and at the top of the back and at the side of the back. So I can introduce my darker shadows afterwards. So this is a soft, I haven't done any shadows on the birds yet. Not forgetting tiny bit of texture on the other side of the body, beyond the neck. Again, be patient, let it dry. And while again, very similar colors I'll do on the beak. Before the black comes in, I'll do the edges of the beak, especially the bottom is going to be slightly darker. If you've done the background right, we can make the beak to stand out and the background stays lighter. I think I can make the whole beak tiny bit more darker, but with a little bit more of that orangey red, so it stands out from the background. Just need to make sure my lines are not wobbly. Maybe make it slightly darker at the root and base. Okay, maybe a tiny bit of a mark for the nostril. Let's see if it's will run or not. If anything needs sharpening, I can come back to it. Just want to make the front flat. Okay, let's come back to it in a moment. But let's work into the head now. So for the head, I'll work for indigo, violet, and small amount of orange, cadmium orange. I'm gonna paint the neck first. Now it's not, shouldn't be super solid. We need to see the transparency of the color still there. It's a dark shape, but it's not overly solid. The importance of painting all of the neck together will come apparent very shortly. Excuse me, my voice is somehow going. Okay, I'm also ending up with slightly bluer versions of this color and slightly violety versions of it. That's brilliant. Carefully coming close to that chest. The whole shape is still wet. I'll just stop here because the paint is drying. Just want to soften it here. Okay, and now I'm gonna go for much more solid indigo. If you wanted to add a tiny bit of Payne's gray, you can even do that. Or just a little bit more extra red and loads more Payne's gray. But that's much more solid pigment. And that's when I can paint the top of the head next to the white. couple of strokes under that white pattern, under the neck, where we can possibly still see a pencil mark for it, the edge of the that shadow. And I don't want to paint the neck, the left side of the neck altogether, but I just want to soften that sharp line. So I'll have a little bit of light left. It will dry lighter, but because I'll be softening, it might just appear darker. So I want to see some light in there. And then the base is going to stay here. That's all good. And after that, I'm much more easier, more control. I'll repeat the process for the top of the head. So paler color first. We're almost moisturizing the whole area. I might even paint over the eye. I can see where it is. I can make the highlight for it, kind of leave the highlight for it within that color. Coming close to the beak, going to preserve the shape of the beak. Just coming most importantly carefully around the white pattern. Okay, that's where the beak is staying a little bit more pointy. And then very quickly, very immediately, that super dark tone again. For me, it's indigo and orange. And what I'll do here, I'll do the eyebrow. Okay. I'll do the darker part of the eye. So hopefully it's not going to run into that highlight I wanted to keep. If it does, maybe just dry the area slightly and maybe we can come back to it. Tiny bit more above here. And then all of this one could just stay. The nose area, kind of the most right-hand side of the head could stay pale, but that middle shape could be darker. We can work around the eye as the paint will be drying. For example, if I dry my brush now, I just blend this first, otherwise it's doesn't settle equally. Just a tiny bit more. I know it's wet, so it will dry lighter. It's not going to stay solid. Maybe a tiny bit more darker on the base of the beak here. And then I will gently, gently dry the area around the eye. Well, not the higher point of the eyes oval. Okay. And maybe a tiny bit under it. Just gives me that slight variation of tone within its dark. I'm going to let it dry before adjusting anything else out on the head. And I'll just do the tail. Again, my indigo will work perfectly for that. I have a shadow here, the one we sketched before. Hopefully you can still see your pencil marks. That's why we also need to have that transparency of layers, as well as general transparency of paint. And then it's again looks very solid black. It will dry much more paler. And I'll soften those edges and make them blend. gentle with your strokes. There could be numerous layers for the feathers here. And then we need a shadow for the body. Now the shadow for the body need to be slightly lighter than our neck. We need for our neck to stand out when it's touching it, where the shadow is touching it. Again, it will dry lighter, but the further away little line could be darker. And that just will show the light behind its head. And again, the shadow on the body from the other side, we're going to have it pale, 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 except when it's going to be next to the neck. So I'll do the same color first to get rid of all the whites. So it will be a united type of shadow first. My indigo is going to be preferred color, and then slightly darker indigo and cadmium orange, and I can do a nice darker mark. So then the contrast of the neck is standing out. So we've got a very three-dimensional feel for the bird. I think the feathers on my bird could be a tiny bit more stronger, and I could be starting tweaking some of the leaves, adding tiny bit of color to them, or keeping them very similar color scheme as they are. But that major shape is done now. So a little bit more details on my Canadian goose. I think I need, my shadows are drying. I can do the tail maybe slightly darker. I think that's a process we'll have to go through to see how the colors are drying. More fluffy tail here. And I can see that lovely indentation of the body as well. So that will be quite a nice shadow, and those two dark sections again I'll need to blend. So in a way I've already had probably at least 4 or 5 layers of feathers over here, which is fine. Okay, let's do some more of these feathers, and let's see again how they will dry. Again, tells me more about the bird. Okay, some final hopefully strokes on this time, but we'll have to see how they dry. It's nice. Tiny bit more imitation of the feathers on the other side. Don't want it to be spoiled with a shadow, but so some of the strokes for the feathers I'll do over the shadow. So if they're darker feathers, they will not be interrupted. They're not going to get lost. Okay. It's fine. Any little nuances on the border of the water here. Okay, that's all good. Right, let's do a little bit of the plants. Now I would like to do them in the same colors. I just don't think mine will work well if I start adding some greens to them and browns to them, and I think I'll work with the shapes, so with the colors I've been using. So maybe some lighter strokes, maybe more orangey browns, some sharper lines, some wider ones. Okay, maybe this one could have a bit of darkness using the indigo, more of a shadow. Okay. I think there was another one somewhere here, but I might just put it a bit lower. Just look what shapes you have in front of you and don't overwork them, don't over busy them. Maybe cluttering off some of these. And roots, maybe some of these ones a bit more together. Okay. And the other side, just tiny bit more. Again, where the color is going in, slightly wider shapes of the leaves. They will settle in again quite gently. Now, I have got these 3 marks telling me that there must be something coming out that way as well. So I can't do the strokes in reflection, but not to have them afterwards. Okay, well, these ones could have some reflections as well. I haven't done them either. So those little nuances. And just to finish off the painting, the goose's neck looks very bold and dark. So I want to have a couple of strokes for its reflection to resemble some of it. Quite like what I've done in some of the darks, but I think here I could have a couple of more strokes, which will show me the movement of the water as well. Okay, maybe sharper some of the lines. Okay, again, we will see how they will dry. Couple of tiny bit darker marks. They will dry softer. And I think I want a couple of darker marks on the reflections of the water plants there. That moves that darkness from the bird elsewhere in the composition. Same, maybe small, kind of that dynamic of it all coming together here. Top of the head of the goose. Have I done enough? And then any other happy dots or charged up darker marks around on the water. Okay, maybe somewhere in at the bay, it's far end. Okay, this area looks a little bit too pale, maybe. Okay. So hopefully we've got an effect that he's swimming, paddling. And I think I'm going to stop. I'll see how the plants will dry, and we'll see maybe a couple of darker marks on the side here. Maybe my mop brush will give me more spontaneous strokes. Okay, don't want to overwork it. Okay, that's busy enough. And then to balance this tail, my color's dried here to what I wanted. Few strokes. So then the tail doesn't look on its own very dark. That's good. That's nice, nice, nice. Maybe a little splash of water, sprinkle off. I like that sparkle off little color on one side, some kind of soft sparkle. If I'll do a little bit more, that's nice. If it's a bit too much, I can just soften it. So I've got a little bit of something there, a bit of something there. So maybe some insects, something buzzing. And then if you wanted to add a couple of birds flying, and that could be another little nuance, a little stroke. I fancy maybe adding a couple of birds. Just gives it distance. They're there. I think I'll do another one to balance it. That it's all nesting little lake. Thank you very much for joining me today. And I look forward to seeing your final paintings.